You pull onto the forecourt, the mechanic takes one look at your car, and I once watched a man's shoulders drop before he'd even said a word. I know that look now. I spent 20 years buying the wrong cars for the wrong reasons, and I paid for it in four-figure repair bills. Here's the hard truth I learned. The badge that impresses your neighbor is often the exact badge that makes a good mechanic quietly want to lock the door. Some engines were built to break, and by the end, I'll show you the 3 vehicles UK garages secretly trust, plus a free government tool that reveals a car's entire hidden history in about 90 seconds. You already own everything you need to use it. Let me take you back to the moment this all started for me. It was a wet Tuesday in a small independent garage just outside Reading, and I'd brought in my pride and joy, a 5-year-old German saloon that had cost me a small fortune. The owner, a quiet man named Dave who'd had oil under his fingernails since the 1980s, put it on the ramp, went silent, and then said something I'll never forget. He said, "You didn't buy this new, did you? Good. Let someone else take the first hit." I didn't understand what he meant. I thought I'd bought quality. I thought the price tag meant peace of mind. I was about to learn that in the world of modern cars the opposite is often true, and that the people who fix them for a living see patterns the rest of us never get to see. So I did something I'd never done before. I started asking mechanics, real ones, independent ones, the kind who own their own tools and their own reputation, one simple question. If your own money was on the line, which cars would you refuse to touch? Their answers were so consistent, so specific, and so shocking that I started writing them down. And the first name came up again, and again, and again. It was the modern BMW diesel. Now, I want you to understand my bias here, because I had one. I believed German engineering was the gold standard. I believed it the way you believe the sun comes up. But the mechanics kept pointing at one specific thing, an engine family called the N47, built roughly between 2007 and 2014, and dropped into an enormous number of 1 Series, 3 Series, and 5 Series cars all over Britain. The problem is the timing chain. Now, a timing chain is supposed to be the one part you never worry about. For decades, a chain was the reliable choice, and a rubber belt was the part you replaced. A chain was meant to last the life of the engine. But here's what BMW did, and here's why the garage has grown. They put the timing chain at the back of the engine, against the bulkhead, the firewall, the wall between the engine and the windscreen. Think about that for a second. To reach a part that fails, and it does fail, often well before 100,000 miles, the mechanic frequently has to pull the entire engine out of the car. I got a quote once out of curiosity for a chain that had started rattling, 2,000 pounds, on a car I could have bought for 4,000, and when that chain snaps, and I've seen the photos, the valves smash into the pistons and the engine is scrap metal. Dave told me he'd turned away 3 of them in a single month because the job simply wasn't worth the grief, and the customer never believed the price until the invoice landed. And that's when the first real question hit me. The one that changed how I looked at every car after that. Why would the finest engineers in the world put a known wear item in the single most expensive place to reach it? That question doesn't have an innocent answer, and it took me deeper than I ever expected to go. Because here is what I found. That design wasn't an accident, and it wasn't stupidity. It was a decision. Putting the chain at the back let them make the engine shorter and package it a certain way, and by the time the chains started failing in big numbers, the cars were out of warranty and the cost landed squarely on you and me, the second and third owners. The manufacturer had already banked the profit. I felt genuinely cheated when I understood that, because I'd been raised to believe that paying more meant getting more. What I was actually paying for, in a lot of cases, was a repair bill on a timer. And once I saw that pattern, I started seeing it everywhere, especially in the car I'm about to talk about, which mechanics fear more than almost anything else on British roads, the Range Rover, and the wider Land Rover family with it. Now this one hurt me to accept, because there is nothing on earth that looks more like success than one of these parked on your drive. But I sat with a mechanic in the Midlands who specializes in them, a man who makes very good money from them, and even he told me he'd never own one out of warranty with his own cash. Let me tell you why. Because the numbers are almost comical. It starts with the air suspension. Instead of normal steel springs, these ride on bags of pressurized air, and when they leak, and they do leak, the car sags overnight like a tired animal, and the bill to sort it can run well past £1,000 a corner. Then there's the electronics. These vehicles have dozens of computer modules all talking to each other, and when one throws a tantrum, tracing the fault can eat hours of labor before a single part is even replaced. There was a well-known reliability survey a few years back, run by a firm called Warranty Direct through their Reliability Index, and luxury 4x4s from this category consistently sat near the very bottom, with some models showing that a huge share of them would need a significant repair every single year. I remember reading that and thinking about all the people I knew who'd stretched their budget to buy one, believing it was an investment. It wasn't an investment. It was a subscription, and the payments were repair bills, and they never stopped. But the part that truly got under my skin was something a service manager let slip. He said the depreciation and the repair costs are so brutal that these vehicles are, in his words, cheap to buy and impossible to own. A 40 or 50,000 pound vehicle can drop to a fraction of that in a few short years, which tempts an ordinary buyer into thinking they've found a bargain. And that, therefore, is the trap. The low price isn't a gift. It's the market screaming a warning that the true owners could hear and the new buyer couldn't. The cost of not knowing this can be your entire savings, gone, one leaking air strut at a time. Now at this point in my journey I'd have told you the problem was fancy, expensive cars, and that the answer was simply to buy something small and cheap and sensible. I believed that for a while, and then I discovered the wet belt, and I realized the rot had spread into the most ordinary cars on the school run, the ones bought by careful people trying to do the right thing. This is the part almost nobody knows, and it made me angrier than anything else I found. Let me explain what a wet belt actually is, because when I first heard the phrase I thought it was a joke. For as long as engines have existed, the rubber timing belt lived on the dry outside of the engine, where you could see it, where it stayed clean, and where you replaced it every so often as normal maintenance. But around 2012, to squeeze out a tiny bit more fuel economy and hit tightening emissions targets, several manufacturers started running the timing belt inside the engine, soaked in engine oil. They called it a belt-in-oil design. Ford put it in the little 1-liter EcoBoost petrol. The French group behind Peugeot, Citroën, and Vauxhall put it in their 1.2 PureTech petrol engine, an engine that was so celebrated it won International Engine of the Year awards, and I want you to hold on to that fact because it's important. Here's the problem. The belt sits in the oil, and over time the belt material breaks down. It sheds tiny particles of itself into the oil. Those particles get sucked toward the oil pump pickup, and they can starve the engine of oil, or the belt itself can shred and fail, and either way the result is the same. A catastrophic engine failure on a car that might only be 6 or 7 years old. I spoke to a mechanic who told me he was seeing PureTech engines come in with the belt already turned to a soft, sticky mush, clogging the pickup screen like hair in a plug hole. He said, and I wrote it down word for word, "These aren't old bangers. These are cars people are still paying finance on." That sentence is the whole problem in miniature. The machine fails, but the debt keeps breathing. I spent years mapping exactly that, and I wrote it all down properly, because a video can show you which engines rot and which garages sigh, but it cannot walk you through what to sell, what to hold, what to walk away from, and how to get back what a rigged finance deal took out of your pocket. That is what my 3 books do, in order from the first fixes any driver can make this week, through the deeper work of protecting what you have built, right up to the full system with real case studies, decision templates, and a 12-month plan you can actually follow. They are for the sensible driver who is tired of being the mug on the forecourt, and who has worked out that he does not have a car problem, he has an information problem. If you want the complete version of what is helping you right now, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment. Now, back to the ordinary cars, because knowing the engine is only the beginning, and there is something you can do about it today. And this is the section I most want you to hear, because I know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking this is a video for people with money to burn, people who buy luxury toys and deserve what they get. But this next part is specifically for you, the person who drives a small, sensible, affordable car and just wants it to keep going. And I promise you can act on this today with nothing but the phone or computer you already have. Because the wet belt problem hides inside cars ordinary families buy on tight budgets. And the good news is you do not need to be a mechanic to protect yourself. Here is what I learned to do, and it costs nothing. First, before you ever buy a used car, and even for the one sitting on your drive right now, find out the exact engine. On the French group engines, the ones to be most careful with are that 1.2-liter 3-cylinder PureTech petrol. On Ford, it's the 1-liter EcoBoost. You can find the engine size in the vehicle documents or by simply searching the model and year. Second, and this is the trick the mechanic gave me for free, if you own one of these, cut your oil change interval in half. The manufacturers often recommended oil changes as far apart as 20,000 miles, which is madness for a belt sitting in that oil. Change it every 5,000 to 8,000 miles instead, using the exact oil grade specified, and you dramatically slow the belt breakdown. That one habit, which costs the price of an oil change, can be the difference between a car that dies at 70,000 miles and one that sails past 150,000. And third, if you're viewing a used one, ask to see the oil filler cap and look inside with a torch. If you see sludge, or a gritty deposit, or anything that looks like it doesn't belong, walk away. I've done this in car parks with sellers watching me nervously, and twice it saved me from a disaster I could see with my own eyes. You don't need a diagnostic computer. You need a torch and the willingness to say no. That, I realized, is real power, and it had been sitting in my pocket the whole time. But knowing what to avoid is only half the battle, and there's another category of car the garages dread that I haven't touched yet, and it's one that fools people precisely because it feels so clever and so modern. I'm talking about the automatic gearboxes that were never built to last. You've heard of the DSG gearbox, or maybe you haven't by name, but you've almost certainly ridden in one. It's the fast-shifting automatic used across the Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, and Seat family, and when it works, it's genuinely brilliant. But inside it sits a component called the mechatronic unit, essentially the electronic hydraulic brain of the gearbox, and when that fails, and on certain versions it fails often, you're looking at a bill that can climb past 1,500 or 2,000 pounds. Then there's the dual mass flywheel, a heavy, clever part designed to smooth out the vibrations of modern diesels, fitted to a huge range of cars, that can cost the better part of 1,000 pounds to replace when it wears out, which it always eventually does. And then, the one that made me shake my head, the CVT gearbox found in a lot of Nissans and some Renaults. A CVT is a continuously variable transmission, a clever design with no fixed gears, and on paper it's smooth and efficient. In practice, on certain models, they overheat, they judder, and when they go, a replacement can cost more than the entire car is worth. A mechanic in the Northeast told me he'd stopped even quoting for them, because the moment he said the number, the customer assumed he was trying to rip them off. He wasn't. The part is simply that expensive, and the manufacturer designed it so that you can't rebuild it cheaply, you replace the whole unit. Do you see the pattern forming now? Because I did, and it chilled me. Timing chains buried at the back of engines. Belts hidden inside the oil. Gearboxes sealed into units that can only be replaced, never repaired. This is not bad luck. This is a philosophy, and the philosophy is that a car should last just long enough to satisfy the first owner and then quietly become somebody else's very expensive problem. There's even a name that gets whispered for this, planned obsolescence, and the more mechanics I spoke to, the more I heard versions of the same weary sentence, that they build them now to be thrown away. And I want to add a couple more to the list of cars that made these seasoned professionals sigh, because they surprised me. The Mini, the modern one built under BMW, beloved and stylish and, according to more than one garage, a nightmare of cramped engine bays where a simple job takes twice as long because you can barely get a hand in. The Fiat and Alfa Romeo cars, adored for their character and feared for their electrics, where a mechanic told me the wiring seems designed by someone who'd never have to fix it. Certain Vauxhall models with that same shared French engine trouble. And the older, complicated executive cars from every premium badge, stuffed with so much technology that the moment the warranty ends, they become money pits with leather seats. I'd reached a point where I honestly wondered if there were any cars left that a mechanic actually respected. I'd started to think the whole industry was rotten. And that's exactly when the conversations changed, because every single mechanic I asked, without hesitation, without me even prompting, named the same small handful of cars that they secretly trust, the ones they'd happily buy for their own family, and the reasons why are the real treasure I want to hand you now. The first name, every time, was Toyota, and I'll be honest, it almost disappointed me at first, because it felt too obvious, too boring. But then a mechanic explained something that reframed everything. He said Toyota is boring on purpose. While everyone else chased the newest technology to look advanced, Toyota deliberately held back, keeping proven designs, using timing chains in sensible places, avoiding the wet belt trap almost entirely, and refining the same engines over years instead of gambling on new ones. He told me he barely sees the mechanical parts of a Toyota, because they simply don't break, and that a Corolla or a Yaris will often sail past 200,000 miles with little more than servicing, oil, and tires. There's a reason the taxi ranks and the driving schools are full of them, and it isn't fashion, it's arithmetic. The second name was Honda, and specifically the older, naturally aspirated engines, the ones without a turbocharger bolted on. A mechanic told me a well-kept Honda Jazz or Civic was one of the safest used buys in Britain, engineered by a company that started out making engines and never forgot how. He said the joy of them is how logical they are to work on, as if the designer had actually imagined a human being one day needing to reach a part. That sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. It's the entire difference between a car that's cheap to keep and a car that bleeds you dry. And the third name surprised me, and it might surprise you, Mazda. Time and again, mechanics praised the way Mazda quietly resisted the fashions that sank everyone else. Their engines are known for being straightforward and durable. They avoided the worst of the small turbo and wet belt madness, and they've built a reputation among the people who actually turn the spanners as cars that were designed by engineers who cared, not accountants who counted. One man told me a Mazda was the closest thing to old-fashioned honesty you could still buy new. Toyota, Honda, Mazda, write those three down. But I promised you something more, a secret finale, and this is the part I'm most excited to give you, because it's the discovery that put all the power back in my own hands, and it will do the same for you this very weekend. Here it is. There is a free official government tool in the United Kingdom that will show you almost the entire hidden life of any car with a number plate, and hardly anyone I speak to knows it exists. It's the MOT History Checker on the official gov.uk website, and it became far more powerful after the digital MOT records were fully opened up to the public, building on the online system the government had been expanding since around 2018. You type in a registration number, nothing else, no payment, no account, and in under 2 minutes you can see something extraordinary. You can see every single MOT that car has ever had. You can see every advisory note the tester wrote, the little warnings about worn tires, weeping oil seals, corrosion, brakes on their way out. But here is the part that stunned me. You can see the recorded mileage at every single test, going back years. And that, my friend, is how you catch a clocked car, a car whose odometer has been wound back to hide its real mileage. If the mileage jumps from 90,000 one year down to 60,000 the next, you've just caught a liar, for free, in your kitchen, before you've spent a penny or wasted an afternoon. I tested this the very first time on a car I was genuinely about to buy. Lovely thing. Seemed perfect. Seller seemed honest. I typed the plate into that free government page and watched the history unfold, and there it was, an advisory from 2 years earlier warning of a serious oil leak the seller had sworn blind never existed, and a mileage reading that didn't line up with the shiny low number on the dash. I closed the laptop and I didn't make the call. That single free search, taking less time than boiling a kettle, saved me thousands of pounds and months of misery, and it's been sitting there, public and free, the whole time. This is what got me. The knowledge to protect yourself was never locked away in some expert's head. The pattern of which engines fail, the trick of having your oil changes, the free tool that reveals a car's whole past, none of it is secret in the sense of being hidden. It's secret only in the sense that nobody stands to make money by telling you, so nobody does. The dealer won't tell you to check the MOT history. The manufacturer won't tell you the belt is rotting in the oil, and the badge on the bonnet will never, ever tell you the truth that every good mechanic already knows. So here's the truth I wish someone had handed me 20 years and thousands of wasted pounds ago. A car is not a status symbol, it's a machine, and the people who repair machines for a living have been quietly telling us which ones to trust all along, if only we'd thought to ask. You're not the kind of person who gets dazzled by a shiny badge and a leather seat. You're the kind who wants to know how the thing actually works, and who's really paying when it breaks, and now you know something the salesman would rather you didn't. So let me ask you directly, because I read every reply. Which of these surprised you the most? The timing chain buried at the back of the engine, or the belt quietly rotting in the oil of ordinary family cars? And tell me this, have you owned one of the 3 trusted names, a Toyota, a Honda, or a Mazda, and did it earn that trust for you, or let you down? Leave a comment and tell me your story, and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because I'm always amazed at how far this reaches. If you found value here, join the rest of us who are done being sold expensive problems dressed up as luxury, and stick around, because next time I'm going to show you the exact 3 questions to ask a used car seller that make an honest one relax and a dishonest one suddenly remember another appointment. You won't want to miss which question makes them sweat the most. Before you go, one thing. This video gave you the overview, but inside the Old Ways Society there's so much more waiting, and if you're unsure about a car, you can ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Thousands of Old Ways folks like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time. No risk. Now, before you make any decisions, there's something you really need to know. Some cars are about to lose their trade-in value completely. Let me show you which ones, so you can sell yours while you still can. It's starting right now.